Hi everybody, I'm Bill Sanders and this is Watch Art Sci. Today we're going to talk about Oris watches, and it's a very interesting brand, far more so than I thought. And we got a lot to cover, so let's get going. All right, first of all, and here's a very abbreviated history. Uh, Back in 1904, Paul Caton and George Christian founded Oris in Switzerland. And they grew uh, constantly during the war. I believe they probably made watches for everybody, which means both sides. Then in 1946, there was a post-war expansion, and they grew and grew, and they did a number of things. They made their own movements. They had a lot of innovations. One of the things that I liked was they have a little crescent-like thing at the end of a pointer that was a date pointer, and I've always liked that, and I've seen them on other brands since then. I mean, well, not since then, but there was something apparently developed by Oris and some of the other things they have too. Now, in 1970, when the quartz crisis hit, knocked them flat as a pancake. And they became part of what was called ASUAG, which later became the Swatch Group. Under Swatch, they were not happy at all, to put it mildly, because what Swatch wanted them to do was to make nothing but quartz watches. And they didn't want to make quartz, they wanted to make mechanical watches, but, what are you going to do? Well, what they did in 1982, a couple of guys in management who had been with Oris before before the quartz crisis, bought it from Swatch. And from then on, they developed it. Now, really, until 2014, they weren't making their own movements. They were doing a lot of modifications, primarily on Sellita movements. Now, you might say, well, Sellita is really ETA. And to some extent, that's right, because so many of the models they made were on the basis of ETA. They also bought movements from La Joux Perret, which had been Jacques SA beforehand, and but the main ones they were buying them from Sellita. Okay, they still do, as a matter of fact. There are a few from ETA, but not a lot anymore. Most are Sellita. Now, it's not because Sellita is a better deal, but rather because they have wanted to distance themselves from ETA and Swatch ever since they had been sort of like, it was like putting somebody in a coal mine and making them make quartz-only watches. Okay, and then a couple of years ago, well, 4 years ago, 2014, they came out with the caliber 110. Now, 2014 happened to be the 110th year of Oris, and so they called their new caliber 110. It was introduced then. So this is where I'd like to start. I'd like to start sort of with the modern Oris, because it's really, I think, an important development, rather than a lot of time people say, oh, well, Oris, they don't make anything but junk and blah, blah, blah. Well, that's not true. They make some very interesting watches. They're really not high horology, at least at this point, but they're starting to move into strong horology. And if we look at the history of it, before the quartz crisis, they were one of the 10th largest watchmakers in the world. That was how much influence they had, and they made chronographs, everything, chronometers, and every other kind of high quality watch. And now they're sort of is able to do it. Now, you may wonder, well, wait a minute, if they got bought in 1982 and it took them till 2014 to come out with caliber 110? And the answer is yeah. You got to remember, these guys were basically starting over making mechanical watches, which was really rough. I mean, Swatch was right in the sense that they had to make a lot of, people were buying quartz watches like mad. But to gear up to be able to invest to make your own movement took a while, and they finally did. They had to get the right people, and the movement they came out with is I still am very impressed with it. It has a lot of features I like about movements. It's a relatively large movement. It's 34 millimeters, or what they call 15 lingers, Linge, I think. And to give you an idea, if you're familiar with the ETA 6498, which had been made for pocket watches, that is only 16 and a half leagues, so this is a good size one. Now, one of the first things that you notice about the 110 is this great big barrel right at the top up there, and that is for 10-day reserve. It's a huge reserve. It's got center hands for hours and minutes. It's got a subsidiary second or small seconds at 9 o'clock rather than 6 or 3 o'clock, which is usually fairly common. They have a nonlinear power reserve. I don't know why they call it nonlinear. It's just a retrograde. But they call it nonlinear. They have a fine timing device and stop second. That's basically hacking. There's a hand winding, which to me is the kind to have. And then that 10-day power reserve, and it runs at 3 hertz, or 21,600 vibrations per hour. So this is sort of their bedrock, and they developed the 111, 112, 113, 114 with the 110 as its base. Now, the differences, they haven't, at least from what I could see, there weren't a whole lot of difference, very incremental. Now, you might say, wow, they really don't have all of these new movements. If you look carefully, you'll find a lot of companies do the same thing. They have one in-house base movement, and then they build their other ones on it and around it. And this is true with all of them. Right now, they have this single one base, and since mechanical, they have to get their or hand wound, they have to get their automatics still from Salida. And my hunch is that the next thing they're going to make is going to be an automatic. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so let's take a look at Oris watches now. When they came out in 2014, when they first came out with their own movement, they came out with something that's called the Oris 110 Years Limited Edition, and they put their new movement in it, and that was their big celebration. Now, they don't put their movement in all of their watches. They have one that's called the Oris Artix, and it's part of what their cultural group of watches, which is sort of interesting. And so here are 3 watches, the 111, the 112, and then the 113. And each one of them is a little different. And the 111, the differences were pretty minor, whereas the 112, it came up with a dual time and a day-night indicator. The 113 had a 52-week calendar day of the week. So there have been differences, but like I said, the caliber 110 is the base of everything right now. Now, they came out with something, when they came out with the 114, this year, I think it's 2018, when they came out with the 114, they introduced a GMT function, and they came out with it in their Oris Big Crown Pro Pilot, okay, rather than on one of their, what they call the Atelier. And now the price of this is $5,900. Now, for some of the brands we've looked at, that's the bargain basement. And this is going toward the top of theirs. And what I found, I mean, you're not going to find any ones of these on the pre-owned market or the gray market, unused. And but you will on the older one. I found a Oris Big Crown Pro Pilot 111. By the way, too, if you see the numbers next to them, like from 110 through 114 right now, that means they have the new movement, the new in-house movement. Now here, both of these watches are based on the 110, the caliber 110. They're both 44 millimeters. They're both part of their Big Pilot line. Actually, these two are called the Pro Pilot. And the difference is simply in the movement. Now, if we look at the one from a few years ago, the 111, I found it for $39.75 on Chrono 24, and that's down from $5,600 and a good deal down from $5,900. So if you're interested in this kind of watch, you can now begin to find both gray market prices as well as beginning to find some pre-owned coming into the marketplace, if you like that kind of watch. The four types of watches they have four categories. The first one is divers. The second one is what they call culture. The third one is aviation. That Big Crown Pilot is part of that, or Pro Pilot. And then they have the Motorsport. So we're going to take a look at a sample of these. And that's they're if you go to the pre-owned market or the sort of, if you find older models, Oris has the best deals around. I mean, they got watches that are super affordable. I mean, well under $1,000, you can find some neat watches. Now, granted, all of those watches, in fact, the great majority are going to be a Solita movement, maybe a Laju Pereira movement here and there. I think I found one, and then you have a few ETAs. But like, instead of having an ETA 7750, which is from the Valju 7750, you're more likely to find an SW500, which is the Solita version of the same movement. Okay, now the divers have three different models. One's called the Aquas, the other is called the Diver, and then the other one's called the Provider. I mean, some of these names are like, in the Aquas, this one is the Source of Life. It's $2,200, comes with a rubber strap. The Diver, what's called the Diver 65 for $2,100, is a new 2018 model. And that has a textile bracelet on it, or not bracelet, but strap. And the one that's called the Provider is a chronograph with an SW500 that I had mentioned before. That SW500 Solita version of the Valju 7750, and that's $4,750, the price on it. But the first two, the Diver and the Aquas, these two particular models are about $2,200. Okay, the next group is called the Culture. Okay, and I found two of them. Now the ones we saw earlier all were the upper level ones with the in-house movement, but the ones that don't have the in-house movement, we're talking about a Solita, I think they're 200 or 220, something, both of those movements are used, and most of these watches are automatic. But I thought I'd have a couple with the metal bracelet. And this is from the Artelier, from the Cultural Group. The first one is a pointer on the left, a pointer day date, and this one's $2,100. Now, virtually the same watch from an earlier model is only, I found one brand new for $795. I mean, it's like the price, you can really get some good buys on this. I like the older one a lot better, and I'll tell you why. On the date pointer, they have a little um, hand, and at the end of it is a little crescent, and the crescent sort of uh, surrounds the date, and you can see it very clearly. On the newer ones, they put the pointer back. I mean, just the arrow or something like they have on the left. One on the left side points to the day of the week, which I thought was sort of cool. And then the date is this little minuscule date window that they have. All right. Here are three more from the cultural group. One's called the Artix, the rectangular, and then the classic. The Artix skeleton, you can see a lot of the movement. And again, they've got so many models. If you go to the Oris site, they're way too huge number of models for just about anything you want. The skeleton, this particular one is the skeleton Artix, and it's $2,800. The rectangular one, complications, $2,400. Now this has got a very small movement in it. My what's it called? My Vacheron Constantin 1972 has the same. It's the same kind of sort of rectangular shape. Mine's a trapezoid or something, I think, but they have a very small round movement in it. They do a lot of stuff with this round movement. Here you got a moon phase, and you have a date subdial, and all of these, and then a day of the week subdial, and a 24-hour subdial, which would make it a second, possibly a second time zone. Anyway, so you got a lot on that watch. I mean, for the size of the movement. The classic, the last one in the cultural group, that's a date only, and that's $1,100. So you got a good price range on these. I mean, it's like you're not this crazy stuff that starts at $20,000. Now here are three from the Aviation group. These we saw the big pro pilots. And remember, the rest of these don't have the in-house movement. The Pro Pilot did, both the 111 and the 114. Now here you have other big crowns that the name of the model is the Big Crown. Big crowns were early pilots wore gloves and had to have a big crown to wind it. And the next one is air racing. Now the one I have is called a Paradropper LT Staffel 7. It's $4,000. It's running a chronograph. It's fairly expensive. Some of the other air racing ones are a lot simpler models than this, but I thought this one was interesting. You might want to consider it. Finally, there's what's called the BC3, and it's called an advanced day date, again, $1,250. These are good prices. I mean, very affordable prices. And then if you go to the gray markets, they're even better. Here's an incredible example. The fourth group of watches called the Motorsport, and one of the classifications is called Oris Williams. And they have the one on the left is the new one, the day date, and it's $1,450, and it's got a rubber strap and for a very active sports watch. Now they have an earlier version of the Oris Williams. I think this is like 2004, but it's only $385, brand new. I couldn't believe it. I found that on Chrono 24, and there were a lot of them available. So if you're interested in something like this, and this one is from the F1 team, Formula One team. Day date, $385. That's a heck of a deal. And so, like I said, the range of the prices here is many affordable ones. Okay, here are some three new ones from the rest of the Motorsport group. The Artix GT. Here's a day date for $1,750, and again the the day of the week, instead of in a little window, they have these pointers for them. The TT1 has an engine date. I'm not sure what an engine date is, but it looked like a really interesting watch. This one's $1,700. And finally, they have what's called the Oris. And this one is it's either chronometer or chronograph. This one looks like a little chronograph for 1750. It's the date. Like I said, there are a huge number of models of the Oris. You have the most expensive ones are the ones with the 110 base movement. So you have 110, 11, 12, 13, and 14 right now. So you got, I mean, if you want an in-house movement from Oris, and at a decent price, you're talking about $4,000 or $5,000 for a top-of-the-line movement. At least I think it's the top of the line. It's got everything I like: lower hertz and hand wound. So anyway, so there are a lot of really interesting things going on with Oris. Okay, well, listen. As always, I would really value your opinion. Oh, people, for some reason, whenever I wear this sweater, people say, "Oh, that's a weird." The English call these jumpers. Americans call them sweaters. This is from Estonia. I got it in sort of like their I guess cultural style, folk style sweaters that they had. So, it's very warm and it's colder than unbelievably cold right now. So, you can relax about my sweater, I hope. Or jumper, if you want to call it that. Always, this is an invitation to subscribe if you'd like. And until Sunday, this is Bill Sanders for Watch Art Side, the art and science of watch collection.